everyone! Long time no see. This is going to be a long video, so I'm going to get right to it. Since this year was the 20th anniversary of Tokyo Mew Mew, I decided to do something special. I decided to completely overhaul the original Gildan Mew Mew story and characters.
Attacking our friend, we will fight to make it right!
Yes, that Gildan Mew Mew. Now, I'm not going to make a new fanime or comic, but I want to give GMM a storyline that isn't just Tokyo Mew Mew recreated with my OCs. Right off the bat, I'm going to age up all of the characters to be in high school instead of middle school before I go into any parts of the new story. For the new GMM story, I imagine it taking place at the same time of the original Tokyo Mew Mew. Ryu's cousin, and for the sake of being funny, I'm actually just going to keep calling him Elliot, is concerned about aliens invading North America after hearing about the attacks in Japan. He begs Ryu to use his Mew project to create new heroes. Ryu reluctantly agrees to share his project as long as Elliot oversees everything. Now, Elliot activates the Mew project after finding compatible DNA, and thus GMM is born. So we're going to start off by redesigning Mew Ashley. Clearly this was a self-insert. All of the girls were actually just self-inserts of me and my friends, if that wasn't obvious by the sheer amount of Mew Mews that there were. Because of that fact, I'm going to be describing the new personalities of the characters, and at the end of the design, they're actually going to be getting an entirely new name. Now, Ashley and Deanna did share the role of leader in the original, but in this reboot, Ashley's actually going to be the main leader. There will be two other leaders as well, but I'll get back to that in another video. Now, Ashley is your basic leader. She can be very headstrong, impulsive, and a bit sassy, but she loves her friends and she would do anything for them. In this new version of the story, Ashley, Deanna, and Caitlin are still best friends, and when the Mew project is activated, they are actually with each other at school. However, in this version, they don't find out that they're Mew Mews at the same time. Instead, it'd be more of an episodic thing to find out who each Mew Mew is, with Ashley, of course, being the first to find out during the first alien attack at their school. After that, Elliot would explain everything: Mew marks, finding the new members, working in the American branch of Cafe Mew Mew, the whole shebang. The cafe itself is headed by Elliot. He'd be in his 20s in this project, and his fiancée would be there, and she'd oversee the baking aspect of the cafe. Moving on to the actual design portion of this. For Mew Ashley's new design, I did keep a lot of the same elements of her original character. She still has a ponytail, it's just no longer a weird side ponytail, it's a regular one. She kept the same bracelets that she had, as well as her sweetheart neckline. Her original outfit was based a lot on Ichigo's, so I kinda stuck to that a bit, but instead of having the tailcoat-like design in her top, Ashley has almost a pedal design around the bottom. I did add a color block to the toe of her boots just to break the design up a bit. And finally, her ears and tail are colored to look more like a swift fox instead of just like a basic red fox. I've also decided that I'm actually going to be redesigning their weapons as well. As you might have remembered, Ashley had sort of a weird laser sword in the original one, but we're gonna go back to like how Tokyo Mew Mew's weapons actually are. As any Tokyo Mew Mew fan could probably tell you, their weapons are usually based on instruments. So for Ashley's, I decided to go for what looks like a microphone on a stand mixed with a hammer. Finally, it's time to give her a new name. I think her Mew Mew name would be Mew Cake, and her new name is now Ava. Next up is Mew Deanna. Deanna was originally pretty girly and bubbly, but in this reboot, I decided to make her a bit more serious. Her original character had experience in Taekwondo, so I decided to draw more on that for her new character. She's now a martial artist who's one of the best fighters on the team. She's always level-headed and often gives the girls advice, but always remains kind. She's kind of like an older sister type character. if I had to compare her to any of the Tokyo Mew Mew characters, I'd say she's probably a mix between Zakuro and Lettuce. For the sake of keeping things a little less confusing, I'm gonna keep using the old names when I'm describing the characters and their interactions. So Deanna would find out that she's a Mew Mew during an alien attack at the mall while she's hanging out with Ashley and Caitlin. Ashley would purposefully lose her friends in the crowd when the alien attacks, and she'd find somewhere to transform. She would try her hardest to fight the Chimera Anima, but it would be a bit too strong for her. Deanna would actually head back to look for her friend and find Ashley having a hard time in battle. Obviously she wouldn't know it was her because, Mew Mew secret or whatever. But she would be brave and try and fight alongside Ashley despite Ashley telling her to run. This would activate her animal spirit, much like Pudding's reveal in the anime, and she would become a Mew Mew and join Ashley's team. For her design, I decided to give her braids so that her hair was up for fighting, but it wasn't exactly the same as Ashley's. I did keep her gray color scheme, but I actually darkened her hair to stand out a bit more. She still has the gloves, but they're much shorter. And now that she's more of a fighter, I decided to give her shorts. I did still incorporate that fun little fur design that her original dress had. Her top is now a little bit more like Pudding's instead of a sweetheart top, and I did feel like she needed a bit more frill, so I gave her a bow on the back where her tail would be. Her weapon was originally something called a bamboo rod. I really don't know what that means. It kind of just looked like a stick of bamboo. So that's obviously changing. Her new weapon is something that's kind of similar to what I'd imagine a rod would be. It's actually going to be a bow staff, which kind of keeps with the martial arts theme. And for the instrument portion, it's supposed to look like a flute. Finally, let's welcome her new name, Mew Pepper, and her real name is Dahlia. If you remember the old GMM, then I'm sure you can guess that Caitlin comes next. Now, the best way that I can describe Caitlin is that she's kind of like a mix of Karen from Mean Girls and Brittany from Glee, where she's like the dumbest person that you've ever met, but she has a heart of gold. And she cares about her friends, and she loves to make them laugh and finds different ways to make them smile. Let's move on to Caitlin's story. So, her episode would probably start out with her noticing that Ashley and Deanna are becoming rather secretive after they've, found out that they're Mew Mews together. And this would kind of make Caitlin start to feel left out. She'd ask them about it, and they'd reassure her everything is fine, but she'd still feel a little bit upset and kinda lonely. Caitlin would start to walk the school alone, despite the fact that she's supposed to be in class, and she'd end up getting attacked by an alien and their chimera. As a side note, when I say aliens here, I mean it in the sense of Quiche Pie and Taruto kind of aliens, not so much as the Chimera Animas. Now, I haven't exactly thought too much about them in particular, because I'm focusing more on the Mew Mews here, but I might design them and come up with some sort of story for them in one of the later videos. Anyways, let's get back to Caitlin since we were talking about her. She'd be in big trouble now that she's being attacked by an alien. That's when Ashley and Deanna would show up. They would have been worried that Caitlin wasn't in class with them, and they would have found some way to get out of it. After showing up in front of Caitlin, they would apologize profusely for keeping their secret from her, and they would transform right in front of her to fight the Chimera and defend her. Now, the GMM version of Mini Mew would show up and begin to nudge Caitlin before dropping a pendant in front of her. Caitlin would be confused, of course, but then the Mew mark that's on the palm of her hand would start to glow. She'd transform and she'd help them defeat the Chimera. The three of them would then be so happy that they're going to be fighting alongside each other and that they don't have to keep secrets from each other. And Caitlin would join the team. I did end up changing Caitlin's outfit quite a bit. To keep with her fun-loving nature, I actually gave her poofy bloomers instead of her original plain blue dress. The top remains the same but ends in the little petal designs that Ashley kind of has on her top, and she'd have some cute little bows on the side. She now has full gloves instead of her fingerless ones that she had before, and her coloring is now blue and purple instead of blue and pink, which would cause less overlap in the color scheme since Ariana also had the same blue and pink color scheme. I also made her hair a little fluffier to reflect her outgoing personality. Caitlin originally had what I called the tigerang, which is a boomerang, and I did want to keep that, so I just kind of mixed it with a tambourine. Finally, for her Mew name, I thought I'd go with Mew Frosting, and her new name is actually going to be Kelsey. Next up is Mew Sarah. Now, Sarah in this version isn't really one of the friends of the main three. She's a cheerleader for the school, and she's really into all kinds of sports. She can be kind, but is known to have a bit of a temper. She's also pretty cunning and can be a bit devious, but as long as you're on her good side, there's nothing to worry about. The way Sarah would find out she was a Mew Mew would be at a lacrosse game that she was cheering for. I decided to go with lacrosse because that was one of the bigger sports at my school, so we're just gonna stick with that one. Ashley, Caitlin, and Deanna would attend the game to keep an eye out for aliens. As suspected, one would attack in the middle of a cheer routine, which of course would get Sarah very angry because the aliens interrupted them, and she would start bad-mouthing them, while everyone else ran away. The rest of the cheer squad would try and pull Sarah away and urge her to run with them, but she'd just tell them to leave and that she'd handle it. That's when the Mew Mews would show up, and they'd try and fight while urging Sarah to run. Now Sarah's a little bit more convinced to run, so she's going to try to, but the chimera that's attacking them would actually hit her, and she'd tumble to the side, causing the knee socks on her cheer uniform to roll down, revealing a Mew mark on the back of her calf. She would then be given a pendant, and she would transform, and she'd help them defeat the chimera. For her new design, I did end up keeping the majority of it the same as before. Same top, same gloves. She has a little bit more refined colors in her boots now. The biggest thing that changed was the pants that she had. The pants before were supposed to be gauchos, which are kind of like these weird bell-bottom knee-high shorts almost. So I did kind of keep that aspect in the new shorts by adding frills on the bottom of it to kind of resemble the flare from the old pants. Other than that, the only other thing I really changed was dulling down the colors a little bit so they weren't as straining to the eye to look at. Sarah's original weapon was a monkey staff, very much trying to resemble the one from Shell and Showdown, so we're just going to completely overhaul that. She now has symbols that are supposed to be a shield. I imagine that the symbols could stick together as one shield or come apart to be thrown around, kind of like how Steven Universe uses his shields. With her very red color scheme, I suppose Mew Tomato is a very fitting name for her. And her new name is Sasha. Last but certainly not least, we have Christine. Now, we didn't see a lot of Christine in the original story. There were actually a lot of characters that were there for seemingly no reason other than to include more people, and Christine kind of suffered from that fate. But to that I say, no more! So, let's give her a new personality. I imagine her to be a bit more of an introvert. She's very studious and would essentially be like the Lettuce of the group. She has trouble speaking up for herself, but she gets very excited when she has to do any sort of research or experiments. So her story would be that she became interested in what was causing all of the monster attacks. She'd wind up finding one of the little alien infusers and capture it in a jar. While observing it at home, she would be approached by the main alien, and even though she's scared, her curiosity would get the better of her. Christine would then agree to meet up with them after school the next day to learn all about the invading aliens, and all she had to do was bring that little infuser with her. During school the next day, the GMM version of Mini-Mew would alert the main trio of Mew Mews that it senses an alien, and that would happen like all day. But since it's just the one that's in the jar Christine has with her, they wouldn't be able to find it. Finally, the girls would get fed up that Mini-Mew keeps telling them that there's an alien when they can't find one, and Ashley would offhand mention that maybe Mini-Mew needs to be fixed. But Deanna would notice Christine behind them acting sort of nervous and suspicious. Just as a note, in this version, Christine and the girls are actually not friends, just due to Christine being in a lower grade than the other girls. Anyway, Deanna would mention that she does find it suspicious, and they end up following Christine out behind the school. They text Sarah to meet them there just in case anything happens. They would see the alien trick Christine and try and take her spirit, and that's when the Mew Mews would jump in to try and defend her, while the alien is left wondering why they couldn't take her spirit. While the Mew Mews argue with that alien, Christine is left on the ground behind them. She's kind of bewildered, but she's looking up at the Mew Mews, and she actually notices Ashley's Mew mark on her shoulder and Sarah's on her calf. She recalls that she actually got a strange mark behind her ear after the earthquake when everyone was infused. She'd put two and two together and end up asking if she's like the Mew Mews. She'd bring up that she actually has a similar marking to Ashley and Sarah's, and if she was like them, then that would explain why her spirit couldn't be taken. Ashley would then ask Mini-Mew, and Mini-Mew would confirm it, and then Christine would be given a pendant, transform, there'd be a chimera fight, and they'd chase off the alien. Christine would then join the team as the final member, and all five would work at the cafe together, and they'd fight aliens to protect the Earth. So, besides her hairstyle, Christine's design is completely different. Due to her character being more of a cutesy and shy person, I thought a baby doll dress would fit a lot better for her. I did keep the colors the same for the most part, just desaturated them a bit so they aren't as blinding to look at. Her old weapon was sort of a megaphone-like thing, but I decided to go with something a little bit cuter, so instead, it's going to be a microphone mixed with a magic wand. Her Mew Mew name is Mew Blueberry, and her new name would be Camille. So what do you think of the new Mew Mew so far? I know I said that Christine is the final member, but that's just of this team. There's still more to come, so stay tuned for part 2, where I'll be redesigning 5 more Mew Mews and revamping their stories.